Today I'm going to show you how to make one of our RD approved meals. It's grilled chicken with tabbouleh salad. So as you can see, I've got all my ingredients set out and ready to go, and let's get started. All right, so first thing that I did was I went ahead and preheated the oven to 400 degrees just so that gets warmed up. While that is heating up, we can go ahead and get started with our grains because those are probably going to take the longest to cook. So today I've got some red quinoa and some bulgur wheat, both whole grains, and the bulgur wheat specifically is unique to the tabbouleh that we're cooking today. So with the red quinoa, I am going to add half a cup. And I'm just going to add it to my medium-sized pan. And then the bulgur wheat, I'm going to add 3/4 cup. Perfect. And then for the water, I'm going to go ahead and add 3 cups of water. All right. Now that that's ready, I'm just going to put this on top of the stove, and I'm going to have it come to a boil, probably on medium to high heat. Once it's at a boil, I'm going to reduce the heat to a low so that it can simmer until all of the moisture has evaporated. Should probably take about 20 minutes. Alrighty, so now that we have the grains going on the stove, we're going to go ahead and put together our marinade for the chicken. Pro tip, I would definitely recommend preparing the marinade ahead of time. We want at least 2 hours for it to marinate. I actually did mine last night and put it in the fridge overnight, but I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I made that marinade. So we're gonna start with some olive oil first. Let me just check my recipe here. We're gonna do a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and I've actually already got it prepared in this measuring cup. Next is gonna be the garlic. So I've got 3 cloves of garlic here, and I'm just gonna smash these so I can get the peel off. Once you have the garlic ready without the peel, you can chop it if you'd like just by hand with the knife. You could also use a garlic press if you want, or you can even grate it with one of these finer cheese graters. All right, so I'm just finishing up. My favorite method is the garlic press. So that's 3 cloves of garlic that I've added in here. And then next we're gonna go ahead and add some of our parsley. So I have today the curly leaf parsley. There's curly leaf or the flat leaf. I think classically it's the curly leaf in a tabbouleh recipe, and I just kind of prefer the curly leaf. It just has a little less of that strong parsley taste, and it's a little more fresh to me. So we want about 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley for this marinade. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pick off the leaves until I've got about 2 tablespoons. Okay. And next I'll just roughly chop it. Okay, once that's chopped, I'm just going to add that to our same marinade dish. And then lastly, I'm just gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper for a little bit of flavor. You can also add a little bit of acid to this marinade if you'd like. It kind of helps tenderize the meat and just adds a little bit of brightness. So if you wanted to do maybe some lemon juice or some red wine vinegar, because that's what we're going to be working with later in the dressing recipe. So you can get creative, do whatever you'd like. I'm just gonna stick with this for today. Okay, so I've got this ready. I'm gonna whisk it up. I'm just using a fork. Perfect. And then the last step with this is we just wanna add this to our chicken and then let it marinate like I mentioned. Like I said, already marinated mine, so I just like to put it in a Ziploc bag. I did pound my chicken beforehand just to kind of get them equal thickness. That way they cook more evenly, they take less time to cook. Mix it around, keep it in the fridge, 2 hours up to 4 days. And then it'll be ready to bake. Okay, so now I'm just gonna add our chicken to a baking dish so that we can get it in the oven and cooking. I just grabbed some tongs because I would rather not grab raw chicken with my hands. I've got, I think, about 4 or 5 pieces of chicken in here. Just place them on here, spread them out as evenly as you can. You can see the parsley on here, it looks really good. And I'm just going to pop this in the oven, bake them until they're done. I'm probably gonna start with about 20 minutes. You can always check the temperature and just make sure it's at that 165 to make sure it's cooked all the way through. Alrighty, so next we're gonna work on the roasted vegetables that are in the recipe. So for that, I'm going to use my onion, some carrots, my bell peppers, and that's it. So for chopping the onion, I am gonna do larger chunks just because we are gonna be putting it in the oven to roast. I like to start with either end. And then I like to chop it in half. That way I can get the peel off. Nobody wants that. And like I said, just kind of a rough chop. So, I don't know, they're probably about 1 inch thick, 1/2 inch to 1 inch. And I'll just go ahead and add this to my pan. All right, next I'm gonna work on the bell peppers. So this recipe calls for about 1/2 of each color. It's always kind of fun to have, different colors in your recipes. They offer different antioxidants, or polyphenols is what we call them specifically. So I'm gonna chop it in half, and then you will want to remove the seeds. And then again, just a rough chop with the bell pepper. All right, we'll go ahead and do our yellow bell pepper next. I did want to mention, so with the other bell pepper, I did kind of cut it halfway down the middle. That's always just kind of how I've done it. But another option could be to cut along the seams of the bell pepper. That way you're kind of cutting right where this like white fleshy part is, and you can kind of peel that away and not have it in your recipe. So I'm just gonna follow those lines. And so now you've just got this little bit of a wedge that you can just peel around and chop from there. Next up is the carrots. So I do like to peel my carrots. So I just peeled most of this one, just finishing up here. And then I'm going to go ahead and chop this guy. I like to chop either end. Then I like to chop it down the middle right here just to make it a little easier so that it doesn't slip on you and put you at risk of chopping your fingers. And then I'll cut this guy in half. And I'm just kind of chopping them up into like fourths. So I'm gonna cut each half into another half and chop from there. All right, I'm just gonna get these dressed up for the oven. I'm adding a little bit of olive oil. The recipe calls for a couple tablespoons. And then to spice these up a little bit, I am going to add some cumin. We're gonna add 3/4 teaspoon of cumin. sprinkle that on. And then we are also going to add some garlic powder, half a teaspoon. Gotta pop the top off of this so that I can measure. You can also add a little bit of salt and pepper here as well, if you'd like. Once you have all your spices added, just toss it around with a spoon, spatula, that way you just disperse those flavors evenly. And the oil will help the veggies from sticking to the bottom as well. Okay, that looks good to go. I'm just gonna shake it a little bit so that it flattens out. And I'm just gonna add this in the oven next to the chicken, bake it until they're roasted and have that nice caramelized flavor, probably about 10 minutes, but I'll check on them and I'll let you know. I just want to check on the grains that we have going really quick, see how they're cooking. Looks pretty good. Give it a little stir, but you can see that there's still a little bit of water in there, so I'm gonna keep it going on the low for just a few more minutes. Now we've got our fresh vegetables that we're not roasting that I want to chop up just to have ready to add later. So I'm going to start with some tomatoes, just little cherry tomatoes. I'm just going to halve them. You could always cut them into quarters if you wanted them a little more bite-sized. And just go ahead and add this to my mixing bowl. Next, I'm going to chop my cucumber. This is a Persian cucumber. I like these a little better. They're a little more crisp. We want these in what are called half moon shapes. So I wanted to show you what that looks like. I'm going to start by chopping off either end of the cucumber. Again, similar to the carrot, I like to chop it in half again, just so that I have something smaller to work with. So now that we have it about this size, I'm going to chop it in half again lengthwise. And from there, I'm going to slice diagonally or horizontally in about a 1/4 inch wide slices. And as you can see, that makes a cute little half moon shape. So I'll just do that for the whole cucumber. Lastly, I'm going to chop a fair amount of parsley. So tabbouleh is a really herby dish. If you look at pictures, things like that, you can see there's quite a bit of herbs mixed into the grains and the vegetables and everything. So I'm going to chop about a 1/4 cup of parsley. That'll kind of be the green of the dish. And I'm just going to chop it straight from the bunch. It's okay if you get a little bit of stem. You can always kind of pull some of the stems out if you don't want it, but it's just easier and less tedious to do it this way. Until you get about a 1/4 cup. It's a little more than a 1/4 cup maybe. And then again, just kind of a rough chop, similar to with the marinade. All right, final ingredient to the recipe is our dressing. Again, using, some spices, some oil, some vinegar, super heart healthy and delicious. So to start, we're going to use more olive oil. I've pre-measured my olive oil. I've got a 1/3 cup here, and similar to the marinade, I'm just going to mix everything into my little measuring cup here. Next, I'm going to add some lemon to the olive oil. I'm just going to use about half a lemon, so I'll chop this in half. If you have like a lemon juicer press, that's great. I'm just going to use my hands. One thing that you can do is you can make sure that you're squeezing it from the top. That way, if there are any seeds in the lemon, your hand will kind of catch them before they can drop into the bowl. Okay. Next, I'm adding my vinegar. So this is a red wine vinegar. I'm adding a 1/4 cup. Perfect. And then my honey. So I've already pre-measured out my honey just because it gets so sticky. I wanted to make it easier. I've got 2 tablespoons in here and I'm just using a rubber spatula to transfer it. Then I'll add my spices. So we're working with cumin and garlic powder again for the dressing. This part of the recipe calls for a teaspoon of cumin. And 1/8 of a teaspoon of garlic powder. Once we have all of that added in, again, I'm just going to use a fork to whisk. It may be a little tough to mix in the honey at first, but it'll get easier as the ingredients combine. All right, friends, so it's time to check on our roasted vegetables and our baked chicken. The chicken's been in the oven for about 20 minutes, and the vegetables have been in the oven for about 10 minutes now. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what they look like. As you can see, they're looking pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and pull them out. Okay, so I have my chicken here. This is just one piece. I've got the rest of the batch behind me, but I'm gonna start by slicing this up just so it has time to cool a little bit. I also wanted to note that typically tabbouleh is served chilled. You can enjoy it, however you'd like. I think it would still be good hot, but if you have time to let your grains cool, your chicken cool, that way when you add the fresh vegetables, they don't get wilty and sad. But just for the sake of time, I'm gonna go ahead and just add in everything together warm. But like I said, I'm gonna slice this just in hopes that it cools off a little bit before I add it to the salad. So I'm just gonna do slices across the grain of the chicken. It's got a nice kind of golden brown color on the bottom, which is what we like to see. Now comes the fun part where we get to assemble everything. So I've got most everything ready here. I've got my grains, the bulgur wheat and the quinoa. I've got my fresh vegetables and my parsley, and then I've got my roasted vegetables here. I do have my chicken. I will show you guys how I'm gonna serve that up on top of everything. So I'm just gonna take this, medium-sized mixing bowl. I'm gonna start by adding the grains to this. Nice and fluffy looking, and it's fun that it has, these 2 types of grains. If you prefer, you can always cook these grains separate. Again, just for the sake of time, I combined them and it worked out pretty well. They're both fully cooked with that good fluff to them. So there's the grains. I'm gonna keep the spoon so I can mix it all together later. Next, I'm going to add the roasted vegetables. Beautiful. Let's go with our fresh vegetables next. We've got our cucumbers and our tomatoes. And then last but not least, our parsley. Adds a little extra color and that really bright, flavorful taste that's unique to the tabbouleh. Okay, lastly, we're gonna dress our tabbouleh. So here's my dressing. I'm just gonna give it another little stir to get all those ingredients mixed up evenly. And then I'll go ahead and drizzle it over the top. You can always add a little less. You may have a little more than what you need. Maybe you like a lighter dressing. It's always less is more. It's always better to start with less. You can add more if you want. Can't necessarily take it away if you add too much to start with. But considering there's so many grains in here, it is looking like I can use my full amount. So I'm just gonna add the rest of that. And you can also add some salt and pepper to taste as well. looks really good. Super colorful. I'll show ya. Beautiful. Alrighty, so now we'll go ahead and serve it up. So I'm going to divvy up the tabbouleh. I'm just gonna add it onto one plate here. The tabbouleh, the recipe makes about 6 servings, so you can feed 6 people. Since it's just me, I'm gonna serve up 1 serving and then I'll have the rest for leftovers. So what I'll do is I'll just spoon some of this beautiful tabbouleh. Make sure I get all those different colors. Voila. And then I've got my sliced chicken right here, all ready to go. And I'm just gonna top it off. And that way I can, you know, balance it out with every bite. And that way you can save the leftovers, you know, separately. You can have it with or without chicken, but the chicken adds a nice protein, so I'd highly recommend that. And I'll give you guys a little look of what it looks like, or the finished product.